Well, was it a deep state inside job? Let's find out from America's hottest property on the internet, the one and only Jackson Hinkle. Jackson, there's only two possibilities, isn't there? Either you've got the Keystone Cops operating as your Secret Service, or they were in on the crime.
Yeah, I definitely believe this was an inside job. I mean, you have to look at this not just at the microscopic level of what took place that day, but you have to look at this in the span of what's happened to Donald Trump ever since he came down the escalator and announced he was running for president. From the political witch hunt of Russiagate to the attacks on him regarding holding up funding for Ukraine, to now the legal battle that has ensued over payments to Stormy Daniels and not showing that on his taxes. They've put him in prison, essentially. I mean, it's a crazy world we're living in, and they thought that all of this could stop him. It hasn't, and that's why they're now trying to kill him. I saw a news headline this morning. I don't know if you caught it.
They're trying to terminate him with extreme prejudice. I mean, it's not as if they haven't done it before, Jackson.
Yes, I saw a news headline this morning. I'm not sure if you saw it, but actually the photo of the shooter that was taken from an aerial shot above was actually taken 30 minutes before he fired his bullets on that very day. So the Secret Service was well aware of this individual. He was selected as some suspect character on the scene. There was security officials, I think it was the police officials that were inside the building that he actually climbed on top of. People knew his name. They were calling his name right before the shooting took place. There's a lot of weird stuff going on here. And of course, cui bono, who benefits? Well, the opposition leader in Ukraine, Medvedchuk, he came out and said that, of course, Zelensky, the neo-Nazi, would benefit immensely from taking out Donald Trump. And he thinks that Ukraine may have been behind this, or Ukrainian allied centers of power.
Well, I think the Democrats are desperate to avoid a Trump presidency precisely because of the corrupt nature of their relationship with the regime and the previous regime in Ukraine. So it's hard to know where one set of interests ends and the other set of interests begins. But the shooter, let's call him the shooter, I doubt he was the shooter, but that shooter walked a mile carrying a ladder, an assault rifle, 50 rounds of ammunition, for 1 mile, went inside the perimeter to this building, put the ladder up against the wall, climbed up it, and lay there for, as you've just told us, 30 minutes with an assault rifle before anyone even attempted to target him. And he fired 5 shots from that rifle before the Secret Service opened fire on him. Now, there are all kinds of questions that arise from that. What were the police officials doing inside that building? Playing cards? Were they not even watching that nobody came to climb up on top of the building? What was their purpose of being inside that building? And didn't they hear someone on the roof? What were they, partying? And then there's the issue of this water tower, because there is audio of bullets traveling 475 the one, I think it was 500 or 400 yards from the top of the roof, the shooter that was killed. But the water tower was farther away. And there's audio which shows that some of these bullets were fired from farther away than the bullets fired from that roof. And then there's the excuse that there was nobody on the roof because it had a slope. So Secret Service guys can't operate on a sloping roof. Talk to all that, Jackson.
Well, the first thing I'll say is that the police officers inside the building, where the shooter A was on top of, they actually saw him climb up on the top of the building. They said we saw him climb up and then we lost sight of him. I don't know where they thought he could have gone since he was clearly climbing to the top of their roof, but I guess we'll leave that to the investigations. And then you bring up a very important point with the water tower. There also is video showing that some of the bystanders in the crowd, directly the moment that the bullets began to fire, there appeared to be bullets coming from another direction. And you can actually see one of the projectiles hit the railing of the stands right behind some of these bystanders the very second that this all began. Unfortunately, for those who are trying to push the narrative that it was only one shooter, those bullets were coming from a different direction. If they were bullets, it looked like some sort of projectile to me. Clearly, the bystanders jumped when it happened, and they jumped in the direction that would have protected them from where these bullets were coming from. But again, no one in the press is actually doing any serious investigations into this. We also saw this morning that the shooter A, the one that is being blamed for all of this, he had a transmitter device and a cell phone that was right beside him on the roof of the building as he was carrying out this attack, which doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it definitely also draws some questions from me. And if I was a journalist at the New York Times, I'd want to look into it. And I'd want to see what this kid was talking about and who he was talking to, whether he was talking to potentially other shooters. And lastly, this is the weirdest part of all. Just yesterday, Dan Bongino, who's a very popular, political commentator, former Fox News host, he now has the biggest show on Rumble. He did a conversation with Tucker Carlson and Donald Trump Jr. at the Republican National Convention. And he and Tucker Carlson both confirmed that there is actually a testimony coming from an unimpeachable source within the deep state of Washington, D.C., who said that the director of the Secret Service was told to stay quiet about what went on this very day during the attempted assassination if he wants to keep his job. And he was told that by the Department of Homeland Security Director Mayorkas. So make of all of that what you will. I think it's extremely suspicious.
Let's talk about the convention now. Seems to have been a bit of a triumph to me. The Teamsters, forever and a day Democratic Party institution, were present at the RNC. The anti-corporate speeches that I heard would have been welcome at a conference featuring you and me. The anti-war, anti-Ukraine war at least, rhetoric that is going around was greatly cheering, and the appointment of Vance is, I think, a signal that we're not going to war with Russia over Ukraine unless it starts before November. But we may well go to war with Iran if we believe the previous pronouncements of Vance. Tell us more about him.
Well, you're 100% correct about the Teamsters president speaking at the Republican National Convention. First time that a Teamsters president has addressed the RNC in their over 120 years of existence. So that was a huge deal. And his speech was amazing. I'd like to highlight the quote from his speech where he said that the elite have no party, the elite have no country. And I think that sums it up as to why he's open and willing to speak to any candidate, any political party, because that's the truth. You're going to find people from both political parties right now, actually, probably more so even in the Republican Party. You'll find more people who are going to stand with labor. And those people are few and far between. It's in no way, shape, or form the vast majority of candidates in the Republican Party. But there are some, and that's why they're open to speaking with the Republicans. I've long since predicted that this was going to happen, that labor was going to move closer to the Republican Party, or maybe won't endorse the presidential candidate in the race for the president. We'll see what happens. I think they're not going to endorse a candidate, which would be a massive move from the Teamsters Union, who has hundreds of thousands of labor employees. So that would be really big. You bring up JD Vance. JD Vance is a guy who, yes, seems as though he doesn't want to go to war against Russia, but he has a logic fail, right? He says, I don't want to arm Ukraine to go to war with Russia, but I want to arm Taiwan to go to war against China, and I want to arm Israel more to go to war against Iran. I mean, the first thing this guy says at the RNC after he's selected to be the next vice president of the United States, he's not talking about saving America, homelessness in this country, infrastructure development. He said, if we really want to go after Iran, we can't do these small, tiny little bombing runs on Iran. We have to hit them hard. I mean, this guy's insane, but he's controlled by big money to interests that are trying to turn this anti-Russia sentiment in America into an anti-China and anti-Iran sentiment. It's even more foolish, I'd argue, than anti-Russian politics in the U.S., considering China has a standing army of 2.14 million active duty service members, and geographically, it's far less of a strategic point for the United States to attack. I mean, we'll send our warships over to the Taiwan Strait, they'll get blown up, and that'll be that. We already tried to send our warships to Yemen, and the Houthis were able to kill our Navy SEALs and blow up some of our ships, so I don't think we're going to perform any better against China, but hopefully Trump finds reason and logic to win at the end of the day. He's not someone who's particularly hawkish on China. So I have my fingers crossed, but I'm not particularly hopeful about the direction that this new White House will head in.
And where does all this leave Crazy Joe? The videos that are coming out fast and furious now show that he's completely lost his mind. It is a serious case of elder abuse. The party and his family and his key advisor, the virtuous Hunter Biden, are subjecting their father, husband to cruel and unusual punishment. But isn't it now the case that Trump is so nailed on to be the winner in November that nobody else would want to be the candidate, swept away in a red tsunami?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I saw today a great quote. The bullet that was fired a few days ago, it hit Donald Trump, but it killed the Biden campaign. And that's where we're at now. I mean, all you have to do is look at what happened to Ronald Reagan when, after he survived an assassination attempt, he was a relatively popular president. Of course, I have huge problems with him personally, but he, after he survived an assassination attempt, he won almost every single state in the union. So Donald Trump, I think, is going to have, all but one. Donald Trump's going to have a blowout victory, and Joe Biden will be delegated to the retirement home. If he's lucky, if he's not lucky, maybe he'll see some time in prison, although I think he might be too old for that. I think they'll save the prison sentence for Hunter Biden.
So the struggle now turns to what you might call the coming struggle for Donald Trump. Will he follow some of his populist instincts, both in domestic policy and in foreign policy, or will, like he did the last time, he surround himself by Pompeos and Boltons and all the worst creatures of the swamp?
Well, in DC, in the Republican world, I think there's three layers of characters that Trump could associate himself with. He could associate himself with the worst of the worst, which are the Boltons and the Pompeos. He could associate himself with the second worst off people, J.D. Vance and his clique of people, Vivek Ramaswamy, Peter Thiel, all these characters. And then the best clique of people he could surround himself with are individuals like Colonel Douglas McGregor, And well, I think Tulsi has some big problems on Israel and Gaza, but she's stellar on Syria, she's stellar on Iran, she's stellar on Russia. So I think we'll have to see what happens with the cabinet picks, with who he selects as, Secretary of Defense and the State Department in particular, because right now the selection of JD Vance isn't making me feel great. But what I will say is, as a final point on this, John Bolton was in the Trump administration for quite some time. And eventually Trump got rid of these horrendous figures and replaced them with people like Colonel Douglas McGregor at the very end of his administration. But John Bolton was trying to get Trump to go to war with China. He kept talking about these plans for color revolutions in Xinjiang, in Hong Kong, in Tibet, and in Taiwan. And Donald Trump actually told John Bolton, Bolton admitted this, he said, John, I don't want to ever hear from you again anything regarding Tibet, Taiwan, Hong Kong, or Xinjiang. And then he fired John Bolton. So I think Trump is actually a bit smarter than we give him credit for. I hope that he's not duped, manipulated, or, with full sincerity, I hope he doesn't do anything that's going to be wrong in the coming presidency. But again, I don't really have a whole lot of hope. I think he's a wild card, and I think there's a 70% chance that we're going to get some pretty awful foreign policy out of him. But that's better than most politicians in D.C.
But, well, even a stopped clock is right twice a day. The broken clock of Joe Biden isn't ever right. Jackson Hinkle, as always, pleasure talking to you. Thanks for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows.